Beauty doesn't matter in Snow White. I know this is a weird thing to say about a franchise famous for the "who's the fairest in the land" question, with a conflict entirely based on the main antagonist's vain jealousy, but not only is it true, it's the point of the story. Even if Snow White is the fairest woman in all the land, which the more I think about the more I wonder, what does that even mean? No one outside of the evil queen really cares. Because there's so much more to Snow than that. There is only one moment where Snow White's looks unambiguously work to her advantage, and it's a situation absurd enough for me to let it slide. Every other time, it's the reason she has to hide from the evil queen. Take the prince. He doesn't even see Snow when he gets interested in her, more drawn in by her voice and her song, which in Disneyland may as well be a window into her soul. If I sound like I'm joking, I'm not. The huntsman chooses not to kill her out of common decency, but there is a not insignificant chance seeing her come for the lost little bird influenced his choice. The dwarves do notice that she's pretty, on top of the fact that they have zero familiarity with women, but after she wakes up, their relationship expands beyond that. Snow herself only gives notice to her appearance once, when she pats herself down before showing herself to the prince, which she does despite being dressed in rags. Queen Grimhilde is the only character in this entire story so laser focused on physical attractiveness as to let it consume her. And consume her it does. She forces her stepdaughter to dress in rags out of fear of her growing beauty. She consults a magic mirror every day to make sure she's the fairest in the land and resorts to murder the moment she's not. And when her assassin fails, she turns herself as ugly on the outside as she is on the inside to go kill her herself. Think about everything this woman has going for her. Wealth, fame, power. She might even have found the One Piece while she's at it. She's a queen with terrifying magic powers, but she's evil as sin and only cares for how she's perceived, and her unwillingness to leave well enough alone leads to her death. And what's crazy is how much Snow White doesn't care about her in return. I mean, she cares a bit, what with fearing for her life because her stepmom lost her mind, but beyond the actual bare minimum, the woman is a non-factor in the new life Snow builds for herself. Where the evil queen is losing her mind trying to make sure Snow White isn't prettier than her, Snow is off learning to survive on her own for the first time. It actually loops back to reckless naivete as she never considers that the strange woman offering her food might be a trap. Then again, she doesn't seem to really believe her stepmother is magic. Snow White is too busy having her own journey as a character, a journey of survival and achieving self-sustenance. Snow White's story is one of landing on your feet after getting the rug pulled out from under you. Snow's life was hard before, working as a scullery maid in her stepmother's castle, but she still lived in the castle. And if the huntsman is any indication, people were aware that she was a princess and cared for her well-being. But after being chased away, she's alone for the first time, lost in the wilderness. The world presented in Snow White is almost jarringly dark, and the animators clearly had fun going ham on the scary imagery. But in universe, the terrifying forest is nothing more than Snow White's own perception of her situation, literally jumping at shadows, imagining hands grabbing at her, and running from leaves. It's a visual representation of how terrified she is. You'd think she just graduated from college. But when she comes down and realizes that, if anything, she's scaring the creatures that live in the forest, she resolves to stop being scared. And the little bird she helped is the first of the forest animals to give her a chance. Those animals, after she befriends them, lead her to the home of the 7 dwarves, which she at first mistakes for the home of a bunch of little orphans and is shocked at how unkempt it is. Okay, so maybe she hasn't actually left college yet. Snow's actions in these sequences are an act of kindness, but also show signs of intelligence and her own motivation in trying to turn it into a positive for her. She cleans the house out of a desire to help the poor children, but she also hopes to leverage the skills she's gained working as a maid to get them to let her live with them. On top of that, as her animal friends help her with the cleaning, she leads them in doing so as they have no idea what she's doing, and she is not one to leave a task half done. Her plan is essentially to get a job as a living maid by preemptively showing her effectiveness. And it works. Of course, it's not completely solved, as Snow has to adjust to getting to know the dwarves, especially Grumpy, who doesn't like her very much. Ever since her exposure to the outside world and her scare in the forest, Snow White has been approaching every situation with a positive outlook and a rock-solid work ethic, and dealing with the dwarves is no exception. She takes her job very seriously and doesn't stand for any attempts to get around it from the dwarves, who have displayed a complete lack of cleanliness given the state she found their house in. When looking at the story from a modern lens, It's impossible to not notice that her job is a very female-slanted position as a housekeeper, in the same way the male dwarves are all minors, though from what I can tell their job is much less dangerous than in real life. With all that in mind, it's notable that Snow is portrayed as seizing control of the household in order to run it more effectively and healthily. She does a surprising amount of bossing everyone around throughout the movie in all honesty, but it's never malicious and always in the service of doing everything right, as she's kind of the only person with the knowledge of how to do everything right and why it's important you do so. She managed to go from homeless and alone to the head of a household. Imagine that in this economy. Even Grumpy, who was suspicious of her motivation, comes around after spending time with her and realizing she isn't the suspicious woman creature he suspected she was. But it's not like he likes her or anything. Yet, even after finding an equilibrium, Snow's journey wasn't quite done yet. Or rather, the darkness of the world wasn't done with her. Not an unknown imagined darkness like she'd seen in the forest, but the very real darkness of the woman threatening her life. While the forest was a big source of fear, the one truly synonymous with darkness was the evil queen. She demanded Snow White's heart be presented to her. She's the one who planned to have her buried alive. The darkness we see in the movie from her is very real. And unfortunately, Snow was not prepared for this type of trickery, and her attempts to help what she thought was an innocent old woman lead to her being poisoned. If she was alone, Grimhilde might have won. But she wasn't alone. Snow White's naivete is a flaw she doesn't overcome in the movie, but what she lacks in suspicion, she makes up for in caring allies who can cover for her. The dwarf she'd helped and the animals she befriended came running to her defense, while the evil queen, having lost the loyalty of the only person in the movie who we see do her bidding, was alone. She worked alone, she fled alone, and she died alone. And all she had were the vultures, who had been a foreboding warning of her arrival, but were just as eager to feast on her remains, as even the darkness she was synonymous with consumed her.
Extremely fiction.
The evil queen was obsessed with defeating her rival, and she only managed to get as far as a temporary victory before shuffling off this mortal coil. And Snow? Well, the dwarves find her too beautiful to actually bury, probably helped by the fact that she wasn't rotting and was also literally just sleeping. The one time in the story being beautiful is actually to her advantage, and it comes after everything else is said and done, allowing her to remain above ground for the prince to find her, kiss her, and whisk her away to her happily ever after. The comment section of my No One Understands Classic Disney Princesses video assures me that the kiss was a normal way of saying goodbye in medieval Europe. I maintain that the fan theory I came up with in that video that he is magic and knew the kiss would wake her up still has a chance of being true. Either way, as is often the case in these stories, Snow White gets a reward for overcoming her hardships. A handsome true love who will take her off to a life of luxury. There is a non-zero chance that the movie straight up forgot that she is now the queen. Is the movie perfect? No. I mean, it's kind of odd that she's just leaving with this guy, and I think she spent less than 24 hours getting to know the dwarves beforehand. But fairy tales are gonna fairy tale. Snow White is ultimately a story about rejecting the idea of hyper-focusing on shallow vanity, as it will only lead you to ruin, and taking advantage of the talents you do have to stand as tall as possible. Queen Grimhilde had magic and a kingdom at her beck and call, and died alone at the foot of a hill. Snow White had the clothes on her back and found a place to live in, survived an attempt on her life, and was rewarded with a happily ever after. And even when her beauty does work to her advantage, it's the last thing that comes up. It doesn't cease to be a factor in her life, but it's far from the focus. Like Cinderella after it, it's a story of surviving a bad situation, but where Cinderella had to endure being trapped, Snow had to survive being released into the wild. Sleeping Beauty's got some big shoes to fill when I get around to that video. Tell me your thoughts on the movie down below, and while you're at it, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more content. Thank you, and good day.